What would you get if you crossed Fatal Frame with Resident Evil, two of my favourite franchises on Earth? Well, not this show, but it did try, and for that I have to give it points. Zambi is hard to describe. From what I can tell, it was a project developed by Akimoto Yasushi, the creator of the 48 and Zaka idol groups, who also dabbles in horror from time to time. Sometimes these things cross over, and that's the case here, where the Zambi project is something he developed for Nogizaka 46 and their sister groups. Now, I admittedly don't know a lot about the Zaka groups. They came after my time in the idol world, but a little research says that Zambi initially began as a stage show starring several Zaka idols, and then, after that, it was turned into this TV show, which was then followed by a mobile game that's no longer in service. Today I'm only going to be taking a look at the show, so let's dive in and take a look at a show that's honestly hard to review. Zambi is not a good show. Let's get that out there right off the bat. But again, just like Tokyo Vampire Hotel, that isn't to say that I didn't enjoy the show. On the contrary, atrocious quality does not necessarily mean you can't enjoy something, and despite being, honestly, a really crappy show, I found myself looking forward to each episode to see where it would go. I mean, this is a show that very clearly took heavy inspiration from Fatal Frame, added zombies, and then put idols in all the main roles. On paper, this show was clearly aimed at me, but, well, it had a lot of misses that overall brought it down. The show originally aired in Japan at the start of 2019 on Hulu, and if you live in Japan, you can still watch it there. It's not a terribly long show, coming in at under 4 hours for 10 episodes. Each episode is blissfully short at just over 20 minutes long each, which is definitely a blessing when it comes to shows like this. It's much easier to sit down to watch something if you know you're only going to be in for 20 minutes of trash instead of just under an hour. On the other hand, if you do really enjoy it, then that makes it a little sad when it's over so quickly. Let's start with some of the good points. As I mentioned, Zambi channeled Fatal Frame hard, which was what initially got me interested. Although, I'm sad to say, it seems to be the movie they channeled the hardest, and not the games. It's set at Frisia Academy, a Catholic school. Sound familiar? But oddly, this literally never comes up, and you wouldn't even know if not for the odd Bible and crucifix lying around in the background. The show starts with the opening credits ominously telling us that, in 7 days, we will no longer exist in this world, which immediately sets the tone for what's about to come. We then see the Frisia students on a bus that quickly breaks down, and despite being told to stay put, a few girls decide to explore the nearby forest in the dark, because this is exactly what you would do in this situation, clearly. They end up in a creepy village that looks abandoned, and then take shelter in a shrine when it starts raining. There, they hear a creepy song that becomes one of the main motifs of the show, asking whether someone is truly dead or if they're just dreaming. It's unsettling and actually reminded me a little of the music from Kuon, which is only ever a good thing. And, while we're on that note, the opening theme to this show was perfect as well, setting just the right mood and atmosphere, and something we made sure never to skip each episode. Anyway, our main character, who I'll get to a little more later, wakes up and finds all her friends gone. She finds a spear that has been enshrined in the shrine, and then leaves to find there are indeed locals, but they're not very friendly. She stumbles upon a journalist as she's looking for her friends, and as they're walking, they see a shrine gate that's upside down in a lake. It was by this point that I was sold. It's such a neat visual, and everything until this point suggested Fatal Frame the games, rather than Fatal Frame the movie. The pair eventually find our main character's friends at another temple, which has a large creepy pinwheel, amongst other things, and our stony-faced main character, who I think is called Kaede, but I'll be honest, I'm not quite sure, finds a small hokora, with a mirror inside. She prays to it, and from above, we see the girls ominously standing in the shape of a pentagram, with Kaede in the center. An old man appears and chases them out, and nobody seems to care that a group of girls went missing for the night while the bus was being worked on. It's never mentioned again. After this, the show sadly takes most of its inspiration from the Fatal Frame movie, rather than the games. We have the girls at an all-girls academy, wearing uniforms that alone remind me far too much of that abomination. And it's not long until our emotionless main character starts digging into the history of that strange village for some more information. If you're quick, you can spot on her phone that this village is called Zambi Village, and it's located somewhere in Nagano Prefecture. She watches a video that's once again highly reminiscent of the failed rituals from the Fatal Frame games, and honestly, something the show should have leaned into much harder, but sadly, didn't. It's still neat though, and as close as we're gonna get to actual Fatal Frame on screen at this point, I'd say. As it turns out, Zambi Village has long had a particular tradition that is called, surprise surprise, Zambi. This word indicates a state between life and death, and this village once specialized in, would you believe it, coffin making. However, disaster struck the village when a woman who was buried alive then rose from the dead as a Zambi and proceeded to almost wipe out the village. The scenes of this ritual reminded me a lot of Fatal Frame 5, with the coffin makers looking to have taken heavy inspiration from the Flame Keepers and their habit of surrounding you and jabbing their spears into the ground. And no, I haven't been mispronouncing zombie all this time. The Zambis clearly take heavy inspiration from traditional zombies, but they're technically a brand new creation for this show, using the characters for leftover or remaining, Zan, and beauty, Bi. Zambi. A creature that's between life and death, but in essence is pretty much just a zombie, and shuffles around like one too. And if you get bitten by one, you turn into one. It's not long until one of the girls, Asami, realizes that things aren't quite right. The pinwheel starts spinning all by itself in her presence, and her hair is falling out too. We later learn that these are some of the telltale marks of someone who is about to be zombified, alongside looking in the mirror and seeing half your face about to droop off. Freaked out, Asami yeets herself out the window in front of her friend, Kaede, who looks mildly concerned at best. Mildly concerned, or perhaps vaguely intrigued, is about as much emotion as we ever get out of this girl. But again, I'll get to that later. For now, she's just witnessed her friend play splat gymnastics out the window. But of course, the body soon disappears, and when she tells a teacher about it, Asami is back in her room, and perfectly fine. Huh. The first few episodes pretty much play out in this same way, with several other students also turning into zombies as the curse works its way through the school, and we get an ominous countdown at the end, reminding us that in 3 days, that we will no longer exist. It's honestly a neat mechanic, and lets you know not just how quickly the curse is spreading, but how much time until, well, everyone presumably dies. It tells you from the get-go. There are going to be few, if any, survivors here. Who will make it? And how will this zombie apocalypse take out not just the school, but apparently humanity in just 7 days? Well, you have to watch to find out. That sadly makes it sound more interesting than it really is though. One of the biggest faults of this show is that, honestly, not a lot happens. The first half of the show is basically just repeating the same plot point over and over, as more girls get turned. And then the final half proceeds with the school being overtaken, and the days in the countdown turning into hours instead, as the few survivors try to get out alive, whilst simultaneously figuring out what this curse is and how to break it. And despite the initial episode opening with some striking visuals, including a forest path lined by hands poking out of the ground, an upside-down shrine gate in a lake, and the old village and shrine. The rest of the show is spent almost exclusively in the cold, clinical academy that is about as interesting to look at as a piece of freshly laid concrete. They tried to spice this up with some colourful lighting at points, but in the end, you're still looking at the same blank walls in the same corridors, and the same rooms that look exactly the same as the last. The show could have greatly benefited from setting more of it outside than in. The pacing of the show is also not fantastic. Again, you're reminded of how close we're getting to the inevitable with each episode, but there's very little story happening in between. And then, when the big stuff hits, it all hits at once, before sending you back into the repeating loop of different episode, same thing, again and again. Thankfully, the episodes are short, so it doesn't feel that bad. But when you look back at the show as a whole, you're reminded of how little actually happened. This could easily have been a movie, and nothing of value would have been lost. And finally, I'd be remiss not to mention the god-awful and atrocious acting. If you're a Nogizaka fan, I'm sorry. There's no polite way to put this. Acting is not this main actress's calling. In the slightest. It became a meme as we were watching it. Regardless of what happened or who died in front of her, she only ever appeared super vaguely, mildly concerned at best. That was at best. People were yeeting themselves out windows, having forked tongues jabbed into their necks. People were dying left and right and all around her, and she looked like she was trying to decide whether to put creamy or tomato sauce on her pasta that night. But generally, it was just a blank face that never changed, ever. I don't know what direction she was given, but this ain't it, man. It was so bad it detracted from whatever was going on at the time. It was impossible to feel any emotional impact when she looked like a supermarket part-timer scanning items with a 1,000-mile stare while a zombie apocalypse was taking place around her. You can fast forward the episodes and watch as her expression never once changes. Except for maybe a slight frown when someone dies in front of her. The rest of the cast were about what you'd expect from idols in a horror production. Some were decent, others were terrible, but if you're watching a horror show made as a vehicle for idols, then you should generally already understand the quality you'll be getting right off the bat. But that lead actress, wow. I'd genuinely love to know what the idea behind making her so emotionless was, because it's clear that the character was supposed to have feelings. The actress just never conveyed any. I've never seen her in anything else, so I can't say whether it was just poor direction or something on her end, but wow. Even the actress in Deathblog conveyed more through an hour of hyperventilating than I got from this girl. My other major problem with the show was that nobody stood out. I only vaguely recall that the main character's name was Kaede because they spent roughly half the final episode calling her name repeatedly. There are supposedly several main characters on the show, but I can tell maybe a handful of them apart visually. But who were they? Not a single character stood out as an individual worth remembering. The show reportedly sold itself as focusing on the relationships and bonds formed between these girls during a crisis, but who the hell were they? It's hard to tell what bonds are being formed when I can't tell one character from the next. It's like they didn't even bother to do a basic character sheet with likes the color purple, has a poppy, enjoyed vampire movies as a child. None of these characters had anything at all that made them any different to the next. There was a bully at one point, but she got zombified and I guess disappeared. I don't even know. So again, it was hard to feel the emotional impact when one of the main characters was killed off when I didn't even know who she was or if she'd even been there all along. There were several moments where someone would show up during the apocalypse in the school scenes and the camera would linger long enough that I guess you were supposed to know who that person was and that it was an impactful moment that they were there, but I honestly had no idea who these people were. No individuality anywhere. Having said that, I still enjoyed the show. I would still watch it again, knowing all that. Hell, I might watch it again just for the hell of it, because at the end of the day, it was still basically Fatal Frame with zombies and idols. It's hard to truly mess that up so bad that you can't find anything redeeming in it. Trash and enjoyment are not mutually exclusive things. Some of my favorite media is objectively trash, but that doesn't stop me from enjoying it. On the contrary, things that are poorly made are often some of the most fun things. And if your expectations are appropriately set, you can probably enjoy something like this even more. It's really not an awful show, but it could have been much better. But what do you guys think? Have you seen Zambi? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time.